According to newspaper reports this morning, Rishi Sunak is facing a civil war within the Conservative Party over the future of the Home Secretary, as he's held off sacking her for saying that the police were biased for allowing a pro-Palestine march on Armistice Day, which was calling for a ceasefire, and attempting to interfere with Sir Mark Rowley's work. Yesterday's protest drew over 300,000 pro-Palestinian marchers calling for that ceasefire. The police operation was absolutely huge. It involved 2,000 police officers and a 24-hour guard around the Cenotaph. When Braverman wrote that incendiary piece in the Times newspaper early in the week, she was right about one thing. She said that there would be hate marchers arriving on Saturday in London. The problem is, she labelled the wrong group of people. The hate marchers were the several hundred far-right thugs who battled with police using what they described as extreme violence. The police say that extreme violence was not replicated by the minority of what they describe as breakaway pro-Palestine protesters. I should add, there were a number of people shouting anti-Semitic chants and holding anti-Semitic posters. But they were very much in the minority, and according to the police, in no way as violent as the far-right thugs I mention. In my view, the far right, galvanised by the Home Secretary's rhetoric and picked up by the likes of former leader of the EDL, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and Tommy Robinson, or otherwise known as Tommy Robinson. What happened yesterday was that 9 police officers who were trying to do their job were left injured. What happened yesterday was the kind of violence that I grew up seeing in this country in the 1980s and the late 1970s. What happened yesterday was a complete breakdown in what we think is acceptable on Britain's streets. Suella Braverman, in my view, did not just encourage, but she whipped up and she emboldened racists to come out onto the streets of London, show their faces, attempt to wreck Armistice Day. I'm telling you now, you couldn't find 5 poppies between those thugs. These are people who claim that they are friends of Israel because they're Islamophobic. And yet these are the people that were inspired by Hitler. These are the people who say that they want to honour the war dead. Not just from the First World War, but the Second World War, where those who were killed died fighting the Nazis. And they were there, shameless, on our streets, in our train stations. There's a bit of video footage that's going around, which is a bunch of them attacking a busker and her friends in a London train station. I'm going to play a little bit to you. We had to bleep it, but it might give you a flavour of how violent they actually are.
Terrorist. Yeah, you terrorist. Go on, keep going. Who are you, you? Who are you? Who are you? You little terrorist. Who are you? Who are you?
You're disrespectful to all the dead!
We were born in this country. We were born in this country.
I was born here too.
The person that filmed that video just called Paul's show. I don't know if you heard him. He's rung this show before. He is not a terrorist. He is not a terrorist sympathiser. He is a brown man who was born in Britain. He is as British as you are. As British as I am. And yet Rishi Sunak is just too weak to sack Suella Braverman. Suella Braverman is the Home Secretary of this country. Her primary duty is to keep us safe. In my view, she risked our safety and security with her incendiary rhetoric. And she has to go. So why won't the Prime Minister of this country fire his Home Secretary? 0345 6060973, or you can text 84850. To start the conversation, I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by Georgie Laming, Director of Campaigns at Hope Not Hate. Thank you very much indeed, Georgie, for joining me. And may I say thank you very much indeed for the work that you and your team did yesterday, documenting troublemakers. Can we start with you describing what you saw and what you reported on yesterday, please, Georgie?
Absolutely. Yes. So around 2,000 far-right activists and football hooligans were on the streets yesterday. And I think the Met said it best. They were intent on confrontation from the minute they got there. Often we think these football hooligans kind of wait in pubs to see whether enough of them have turned out, but they were turning out quite quickly yesterday. A lot of them drunk, and a lot of them kind of gearing up for a fight. And I think it's seen through the arrests. So 2 arrests for carrying weapons. We actually reported to the Met and counter-terrorism a few days ago plans from some football hooligans to buy crossbows ahead of yesterday. We saw a couple of arrests for drugs and a few for assault as well. But I guess the thing that I really the point I want to make is that 10 days ago, in football hooligan groups that we infiltrate, we were not seeing talk of Israel-Palestine. They were talking about beer and they were talking about football. And in the last 10 days, something changed. And I think you've said it really, really well. You know, Daily Mail articles, Suella Braverman's speech, Tommy Robinson being back on Twitter, the likes of Douglas Murray trying to incite people. It's shifted and it's deeply worrying.
When you saw what was happening yesterday with the far-right groups, what did it tell you about modern Britain, political discourse and fringe groups and how and why they are being emboldened?
Yeah, I think it points to the polarisation of our politics massively. But also for me, I guess throughout the last 11 months, we've seen the far right having protests here and there. I remember Liverpool at the start of the year, some of the protests around anti-migrant, but this is the first time that I've seen them come out in such force in a long time. And I think it points to a resurgence. It's not polarization of ordinary people, it's polarization and it's thugs on the street who are ready for violence. And I think it's the government's fault. And I completely agree with you. Suella Braverman must go and must go immediately because it's gone too far now.
I do admire the work that you do at Hope Not Hate. Do you ever feel threatened or scared?
Funnily enough, I got a rape threat about 30 minutes before I came on here. So yeah, I do. Sorry, I didn't plan to cry.
Georgie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that. And please only talk about it if you feel comfortable.
Absolutely. No, I do. And I think it's more that our staff face it every day, those threats. But I'm more worried about the polarisation of what we're seeing, and the fact that so many people were so emboldened and so riled up to go onto the streets. But I'm quite used to those threats, but I think it's been a very long weekend already. We had teams out from 7 a.m. all the way through to midnight following this. But it's the fact that the people who probably were kind of sending me threats today weren't the people on the streets, and it's proof of how wide this is, right, and how violent people are getting. And that's why I believe that the Home Secretary has to resign, because it shouldn't get this divisive this quickly.
What do you mean you're used to it? I mean, what you do is monitor extremism of all kinds. And when you said just now, I got it. I mean, I'm used to it. You shouldn't be used to it, Georgie. Under no circumstances ever is this acceptable. Ever.
Completely. But I think it's something about the way that the internet works these days. As people get riled up, they can hide behind profiles and they can send you abuse. And they don't think about how you feel to receive that abuse. It's about one-upping you. It's not just me as a person, but it's also all of our staff face that day in, day out. It's challenging even to monitor our social media and our inboxes at times. The abuse is unbelievable. And I feel quite similarly, to how MPs or people in the public eye like yourself receive it. And I'm sure you've received it in the past as well with some of these divisive conversations. No, it's not
ongoing
okay.
Police investigation, I can tell you now.
Exactly. And you know what? The worst thing is that rape threats aren't the worst of it. The amount of violence that we do receive, the threats we receive are far worse than that. But yeah, I think it's been a long weekend, and I'm trying to kind of balance my feelings about it, because what is happening to me, I deeply think is not important. I think what's happening on the streets is what's important, and that we need to do something about it, and that it's only going to get worse. So I'm hopeful that something will change in the next few days, and that this has been a point for the Prime Minister to kind of row back this harmful rhetoric. But, I'm not going to hold my breath.
Before I let you go, I also want to reflect on those people who were also chanting anti-Semitic rhetoric, also holding anti-Semitic posters and banners. Could you just tell us what you recorded and just set that in context of the large number of marches that we saw yesterday?
Yeah, of course. So I think it's important to say that the vast majority of people on that march were peaceful and they were expressing their point of view. But we have seen a number of anti-Semitic banners and some anti-Semitic chanting. And we're recording all of that as well. It's such a shame that a protest has to be, marked with that. And I think it's really important that not just the organisers, but the police do something about this to show that it's not okay.